Hey everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave from The Dark Stuff. Welcome to video 110. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you a little bit of my trip to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that I did last week. And after that, I will I want to discuss the Hall of Fame because I have some opinions that are different than a lot of people in the VC, I think, and different than the general consensus, which I think most people don't view it as controversial, but I think super serious music fans do see it kind of controversially, and I understand that, and I may have a view that's a little bit different than yours on that regard. Afterwards, I do have some new records, and I want to talk about a band that I actually clipped out of my last video on accident. I edited out something because I was talking, and then all of a sudden I sneezed right in the middle, and then it was like, well, I'm going to clip that out. And when I clipped it, I clipped like about 2 minutes too much and forgot to put this in there. So I'm going to talk about the band again in this one. So here's a little 2-3 minute slideshow that I created about my trip to the Hall of Fame. All right, everybody, this is my little slideshow for my Hall of Fame experience. The building itself, this is the outside of it, is kind of dark, so it wasn't very conducive to taking a lot of pictures. So I realized after a while that taking pictures was kind of pointless, so I just did a couple of highlights here. This is, we're going in. The architecture of the building is pretty interesting. There's the whole merchandise thing. They have a little record store there. Very overpriced, of course. A lot of merchandise. I bought a couple of things. I think I bought a hat and a book. Here's the display on Cheap Trick. I was very excited about them being finally in. Rick Nielsen's 5-neck guitar there. And one of Tom Peterson's basses. And there's some more bass. Very little on Bunny Carlos, just a snare drum. But hey, whatever, he was there, so that's all that counts. Richie Blackmore of Deep Purple, there's one of his old guitars. That's in the display of the new people that were inducted this year, which was Deep Purple, Cheap Trick, and others. Here's something interesting I saw. This was a flyer for the New York section with the New York Dolls with Aerosmith as the opening act. This was in 1973. And I think those bands are very similar. A lot of criticism that there's not enough heavy metal stuff in there, and that is a valid criticism. This was a heavy metal display. You can see some things, there's a Dio thing, there's Rob Halford's jacket, there's Angus Young's outfit, there's Michael Anthony's bass, etc. Very little Kiss stuff. This is all I could find. A ticket with Kiss and Rush, and then those are Eric Carr's wristbands, and Eric Carr's not even in there. This is some stuff on Minneapolis. Here's the Replacements, a single, some flyers, stuff like that. This was really key. This was a contract of the Replacements performing in 1984 as Gary and the Boners. This is an infamous show at CBGB's. There was some sections on Omaha. There's Conor Oberst of Bright Eyes guitar, which was kind of cool. There's actually a couple of Bright Eyes things, and in fact, there's more Bright Eyes stuff than there is Kiss, and Kiss is actually in the Hall of Fame, and Bright Eyes isn't. Here's a Rolling Stones a pinball game that I got that I would love to have. I took a picture of. I would love to have that. Here's a little Guns N' Roses display. I didn't take the picture with Dizzy Reed's t-shirt. I didn't think it was important enough. Big display on Pink Floyd The Wall, of course. That was pretty intense. I don't know if it's the actual wall that they used to use in the 70s, but either way, it was a pretty cool display, which I didn't even realize what it was at first. I just kind of walked up, and I was like, oh, wait, it's Pink Floyd The Wall, duh, Took a couple of pictures of that there. That was near their Louder Than a Bomb display, which was this new sort of rock and politics deal. That's where this was. Quote from Frank Zappa saying that rock music was never written for conservative tastes, which I think is important. Last thing I want to point out is this Steve Wynn here, armed with an empty gun, an original lyric sheet. I was just impressed that Steve was actually included in there because most people don't even know who he is from the Dream Syndicate. But that's all I got for the slideshow, my friends. Okay, so, there you go. I couldn't really get... there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of exhibits, and there's audio-visual stuff with touch screens and all of this, and lots of videos. There's movies on every floor. It's like 6 floors. And it was a very, very well put-together museum, okay? I don't go to a ton of museums, but I've been to art museums. I've been to... dinosaur museums, paleontology, or what have you, and I've done all sorts of stuff like that, and I don't know too much about those subjects, so it's hard for me to gauge, is this a good museum, is this well reflected of what people generally think on this topic, or what have you. But rock music I do know an awful lot about, and so therefore I was concerned about this museum. What would it have? What kind of knowledge base does it give? And I will say on the one hand, if you are a music freak and you know more than just your style of music, like just your genre or your type or your era or whatever, if you're a real student of music, I think a lot of people that watch my videos they know I'm not stuck in the 60s with just the Beatles and the Stones and stuff. I love that stuff. I'm not stuck in the 70s. I'm not stuck in, whatever. Maybe a little bit in the 90s. Perhaps people would say, Dave, you're a little bit stuck in the 90s. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily conceding that point. So I guess a couple of minor things about the hall. I think it's beautiful. I don't think it's too expensive to get in there. $25 or whatever for a day is really not that bad. They're not constantly trying to upcharge you and sell you different stuff. You could buy a membership, which entitles you to get in for free. I suppose if you live in and around the Cleveland area, that might be something you'd want to do. So you get in, you have your way around the exhibits. Now, since I know a lot about music, some of the presentations were not really all that, interesting to me. It's like, do I need to know that Chuck Berry influenced the Beatles and the Beatles influenced this band? Okay, I do understand that. But seeing actual archive memorabilia is really what I wanted to see. That's what's interesting to me. Actual instruments played by these people, actual outfits they wore, actual contracts that they signed, or stuff like that. Really insider stuff. That's what I'm more interested in. And they deliver that with some of the bands. Let's just get to the very topic of should there be a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I know some people just disagree with this outright, that it should not exist. I don't agree with that. I think that rock music is worthy of a Hall of Fame. It's worthy of a place where people can go to a central location to see the history of this art format. And since rock and roll technically began 50 or 60 years ago, depending on when you consider it started, was it the late 40s, was it the mid 50s, was it the late 50s, whatever, I'm not here to debate that point. The point is, it's less than a century old, and it's spread all over the entire world, and it's worthy of having a Hall of Fame. The subjective nature of music appreciation means that everybody, to a certain degree, is going to feel a little bit slighted. Why isn't X in there? Why isn't Y in there? Why isn't this band in there? Why isn't that band in there? And those are valid questions, To me, I was shocked when I was there to find out that, for example, Jane's Addiction wasn't in. They've been eligible for a while. That's a band I grew up with. I thought they were very influential, very significant. Perry Farrell created the Lollapalooza Festival, one of the most successful music festivals in all of music. Nothing, not a mention, crickets. So, I do think that having a Hall of Fame, moving on to a different topic all of a sudden, is more valid than like an award, okay? Like a Grammy Award or an American Music Award or a Juno Award. I think a Hall of Fame is more significant because it looks retroactively and retrospectively at your entire career. You do have to it has to be 25 years since the release of your first album, so people should be devoid of passion for a current artist. There are still artists that are current, obviously. So I'm in favor of it. I'd like to see a little bit more of an opening up to who can nominate bands, but it is hard because if you just go on popular opinion and just go on a vote, just so many numbers or this many people get this many, whatever, you're still not going to get it because a group like the Velvet Underground sold almost no records, okay? Peaches and Herb sold way more records. Does that mean Peaches of Herb is more worthy in being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame than the Velvet Underground? Does the Velvet Underground, just by nature of the fact that they influenced people but didn't sell any records, does that make them more worthy than Peaches and Herb? I don't know. It's one of those difficult kind of questions. So I think everybody has a valid point to question who gets in and who doesn't get in. And you would be surprised at how many artists are just not in. There's also personal biases that go along with the people who invented the hall that, again, you can Google it or whatever, you'll see there are certain groups that should have been in 20 years ago, and due to just ridiculous politics of some, aging hippies or whatever, just refuse to let go of issues they've had for decades. My issue for me is, if somebody says, okay, well, there's a lack of heavy metal in the hall, That's true, okay? You got a valid point, and that's significant. Heavy metal is an important type of music, deserves to be more than just a mere display. But you can also make that argument about alternative music or punk music, okay? There is very little. REM, for example, is one of the most successful bands of the last 35, 40 years. They're members of the Hall. There was nothing on that, and I must have missed it, except for maybe in a general section on Athens, Georgia. Now, they're worthy of more than just being included in Athens, Georgia, right? So even really big bands sometimes get overlooked. The Cure is not even in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, what, The Cure isn't even in the Hall of Fame? They're internationally successful. They've been around since 1976. How are they not? You know, so again, this kind of stuff is, you just have to accept the fact that sometimes you're going to be on the losing end of that argument, that some people are not going to get in the Hall of Fame that should, and some people that are in it, maybe it's debatable. There are some current stuff, current displays that I didn't care for that were sort of silly, but again, I don't have an issue with it. There was a Taylor Swift outfit. Beyonce had this series of dresses from all of her stuff. I like Beyonce. I have no issues with Beyonce. She will be in the Hall of Fame, no doubt, at some point in the future, but she's not there yet, okay? Let's save some space for some people who are actually in it. I mean, Kiss is in the Hall of Fame. They should have been in fucking 20 years ago, but they only got in 2 years ago, and the only thing they have is a wristband from Eric Carr, who was the second member, who's not even allowed in the Hall of Fame. Which is my other main point of contention with the Hall of Fame, is how some groups are allowed to have every member of a band, everyone who's ever been in the band. Let's say, for example, the Grateful Dead is just one example. The Eagles is another example. Every member of the Eagles was inducted into the Hall of Fame. But with certain groups like Kiss, only the 4 original members are allowed in the Hall of Fame. Even though Eric Carr, for example, who was in the band for 11 years until he died, was the first ever replacement member, it doesn't even matter. Why isn't he, Vinnie Vincent, Bruce Kulick, even Mark St. John, even when he played on one album, maybe eliminate him, whatever. Why aren't they valid enough if some guy who played keyboards in the Grateful Dead for 2 years is important enough to be in the Hall of Fame? All the Allman Brothers, everyone who's ever been in Skinner, you know what, it doesn't make sense sometimes why certain guys are in and certain guys are out, and why certain bands, even though they're in it, are not in it. That's all I'm going to say on the Hall of Fame. This t-shirt here, I got at the Hall of Fame, the little 45 adapter thing there. I picked up a hat, okay, and I picked up this book, which is the induction book for this year's Hall of Fame for the this year's inductees: Chicago, Cheap Trick, NWA, Steve Miller Band, Deep Purple, and Brent Burns as an industry person. Okay, I talked about Cheap Trick in my video there about the Hall of Fame, and I just wanted to point out I got the new Cheap Trick record. It's called Bang Zoom Crazy Hello. It is great, okay? It is great. Gatefold packaging. I didn't want to like it. I really didn't, because of this guy, okay? And no disrespect to him, but he is the new drummer. It's Dax Nielsen, Rick Nielsen's son. And again, no disrespect to him. Not saying he's not a talented drummer, good player, etc. Probably a nice guy, but he's not Bunny Carlos, and Bunny Carlos should be the drummer of the band. I get it, he's difficult, I understand that, I hear ya, but I was resistant to listen to it because of that fact. Cheap Trick has had plenty of shitty albums, they've also had a lot of great albums. This one is really, really solid. I didn't want to even give it a chance because Bun's not on it. Bunny Carlos did appear at the Hall of Fame with them. When they performed, he had that groove back again. It just does sound a little bit different, but if I'm being honest, this new record is really, really good. Totally worth getting. Really, really great stuff. Harder edge than Cheap Trick has been doing for the last couple of years. No really cornball or embarrassing moments on this one, thankfully. You know what? That just reminds me something about Hall of Fame and about members that aren't in the band. You know, that don't get recognized. Like why don't they count? I picked this up. I was at Half Price Books the other day, and I saw Cheap Trick Next Position Please, brand new copy. It's made in Germany in 2013, but it was only $9.99. I figured, shit, I mean, okay. But it features this guy, John Brandt, okay? John Brandt played bass in Cheap Trick from, at some point, 80-81, when original bassist Tom Peterson left the band, and he stayed there through about 1988 or 89 when Tom Peterson came back just in time for their big hit album with The Flame and all of that, and their sort of resurgence, and he's been in the band the entire time. I think when a guy's in a band for 6 or 7 years, you certainly deserve credit for being in the band, and if the band is in the Hall of Fame, your period counts too. The fact of the matter is, my favorite Cheap Trick album of all time is this album, One on One from 1982, and there's John Brandt.
She's tight. She's a hell of a giant. She's tight. She's one of a kind. She's tight.
There's actually another guy who played bass before John Brandt named Pete Comita, who did some studio sessions. I don't think he ever played live with them. Now he could be, you don't mention him, but this guy, I mean John Brandt, why doesn't he count? Okay. So back to this record, The Next Position Please. This is a great album from '83. It's not perfect, it's not nearly as good as One on One. Produced by Todd Rundgren. It is lacking 2 songs that are on the CD. The songs You Talk Too Much and Don't Make Our Love a Crime are not featured on the vinyl. And that's the way it was back in the 80s. That's what labels started doing to sort of induce people to buy the CD by offering them extra tracks that weren't on the record. And whether they could have fit or not, I don't know. I still think that's kind of debatable personally. One other record that I got with that $9.99 sale was the debut album from Circus of Power. You might not remember these guys. This is their 1988 debut full-length. They were a New York City hard rock band. Started in '86. They were like really tatted up biker guys, and at that point, 88, 89, 90, if you looked like that, people just lumped you in as Guns N' Roses like. And so to some degree they were kind of like Guns N' Roses, but they had a harder edge. They were much more New York. They had a little bit more New York attitude. I saw Circus of Power open for Faith No More on the Real Thing tour back in 1990. And they were really cool, and I talked to them before the show. They were all super nice dudes. And but I never, I don't know whatever happened to my copy of this album, but it wasn't in my records, and the CD was gone. And so $9.99, I figured I'll get a brand new copy. Again, this is that German thing, SPV or whatever, for $9.99 for brand new. So totally worth it. That is what records should cost, by the way, $9.99. That's proof it doesn't have to be a big fucking $30, $40 production. Now I know those albums are from the 80s, but still, it is mathematically possible to make records, to make a profit, whatever. Okay. I mentioned in my last video that I was talking about a band and I accidentally edited that part out, and I only realized it later because I was in the comment section. I was about to reference the band when I realized they weren't actually in the video. That band I was talking about is this band called A Giant Dog, and this is their CD called Pile. It's out on Merge Records. They're from Austin. They're really, really great raw punk rock. You know, I missed a chance to see them a little bit ago. They write super catchy songs, really, really great. They have a female and a male. They kind of trade off vocals. Excellent band. I played it a bunch of times on my show. I got sent this autographed 7-inch from the band as a thank you. There's a picture of the band in their underwear. So this is a 7-inch for a song called Damn It, Pomegranate, and Can't Complain. Those are the songs on there. It's good stuff. The 7-inch itself is just on black vinyl. And it's not on Merge, actually. It's on a different label. I'm guessing Merge just bought a bunch of these to hold on to. And then last, these are a couple of CDs that I've been digging lately. The newest Radiohead, A Moon-Shaped Pool. Don't need to talk too much about Radiohead. But I am a fan. I'm not an obsessed fan or anything. I have all of their full-length albums, but I don't consider myself, like, I'm not a collector. I don't need every version of everything or all of the rarities or whatever. But the new album is pretty solid, A Moon-Shaped Pool. The new one from The Kills is called Ash and Ice. I've talked about Alison Mosshart, the singer of The Kills. I do like this band a lot. The new one's out on Domino. I just started listening to it. I've been seeing a lot of negative reviews of the record, but I'm not hearing the negativity so far. Maybe it's not as good so far as some of the others, but I don't know. I've been digging it so far. That's all I'll say. Here's a new CD from the Monkees, and I've had this for like over a month, and I just didn't listen to it because I thought, how stupid. One, Davy Jones is dead. Okay. Two, I just don't see the point, you know, and not because I don't respect the Monkees post their era. I mean, frankly, they got better when they stopped being a boy band and they started writing their own songs, and they made that movie Head, and they did all this cool shit, and I got nothing but respect for Mike Nesmith and some of the other guys in the band. I think they're fine guys, but I didn't get it. Then I heard that they collaborated or had songs written by people like Rivers Cuomo of Weezer, Andy Partridge of XTC, people like that wrote the songs, and then like Peter Tork or Mickey Dolenz will sing them. And Mike Nesmith is on the record, he's not really what, and then they have an older song that Davy Jones does appear on. Anyways, this was a fun record. I mean, the song You Bring the Summer was the one that that Andy Partridge wrote, and I've been playing it on my show. It's great.
I'll bring the chips and the dips and root beer, even though dark purple rain clouds are near when you come around.
I mean, it's a fun record, so I didn't want to believe it, but Good Times, the new Monkees record, is actually quite good. Well, that's pretty much it. All I got for you today. I'm going to let you go with that. I'll be back shortly. Take care.